As the last rays of sunset faded from the skyline, the city of Crestwood was swallowed by darkness, leaving behind a maze of flickering streetlights and elongated shadows. Officer Marcus Johnson, a veteran with over 12 years on the force, sat in his cruiser along Westview Avenue. His gaze was fixed on the silent streets, his mind a mix of determination and hardened suspicion. Crestwood was a city known for its hidden tensions, and Marcus, with his ingrained instincts, believed he could read every corner. Yet, tonight, the interplay of light and shadow seemed to whisper secrets of a world far more complex than his experience could ever reveal. At approximately 12:15 a.m., as Marcus patrolled the quiet avenues, a figure emerged from the dimly lit sidewalk, a young black woman, impeccably dressed in a sleek navy blazer and tailored trousers, her style radiating confidence. Clutching a sophisticated leather briefcase, she walked with an assured, measured stride that starkly contrasted with the rougher parts of Crestwood. Marcus's instincts, shaped by years of navigating the city's darker corners, immediately flagged her presence as anomalous in this neighborhood at such a late hour. With his cruiser's lights flashing, he pulled over, driven by the uneasy belief that a woman of her apparent stature and professionalism had no business wandering these streets in the dead of night. In that charged moment, as Marcus stepped out and approached her, the tension was palpable, a clash between his preconceived notions and the undeniable poise of a woman who, despite the setting, exuded control and purpose. After a brief conversation on the dimly lit sidewalk, Officer Marcus's suspicion only grew. Despite the young black woman's calm and measured responses, his ingrained instincts urged him to take further action. He demanded her identification, and though she complied without protest, producing a driver's license that read Ebony Carter, Marcus felt a twinge of uncertainty. Her composed demeanor and steady gaze contrasted sharply with his expectations, stirring an inner conflict. Part of him recognized that his assumptions might be clouding his judgment. Yet, his duty and years of hardened experience pushed him to act. With his cruiser's lights flashing, he reluctantly cuffed Ebony for further questioning, ignoring the silent plea in her eyes that begged for understanding rather than suspicion. In that charged moment, as he led her toward the holding area, Marcus's mind raced with doubt. Was he truly serving justice, or simply reinforcing biases that had long haunted his patrols? Inside the precinct, the harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Officer Marcus Johnson escorted Ebony Carter through the sterile corridors. The station, usually bustling with routine activity, now seemed to hold its breath, its atmosphere thick with silent judgment. Colleagues exchanged curious glances as Marcus processed the woman he had detained that fateful night. At a narrow holding area, a seasoned desk sergeant raised an eyebrow at the sight of Ebony, so impeccably dressed and composed, being led in by Marcus. Without a word, the sergeant's expression spoke volumes, silently questioning the necessity of detaining someone who, by all appearances, should not be a suspect. Despite her calm, measured demeanor, Ebony's eyes never wavered from the camera as she maintained a direct, steady gaze, a silent challenge to the assumptions that had led to her arrest. As Marcus reviewed her identification, the details on the driver's license only deepened his internal conflict. The information seemed to contradict everything he had presumed about her presence in that part of town at such a late hour. The routine paperwork, the clatter of keyboards, and the low murmur of other officers all formed a backdrop to Marcus's growing unease. Every step of the process forced him to confront the possibility that his initial actions were driven by bias, a realization that began to gnaw at him with each passing moment. In that holding cell, time stretched out. Ebony sat with an air of quiet dignity, her unwavering gaze silently asking for understanding, while Marcus struggled with the weight of his decision. The station, with its cold efficiency, became a crucible where his own judgments were being tested, an unspoken promise that the truth was not as simple as it had seemed on that dark, restless night. And so, amidst the quiet hum of the station, the stage was set for a revelation that would force Marcus to re-examine everything he thought he knew about justice, bias, and the true meaning of service. In the sterile, fluorescent light of the holding area, Officer Marcus Johnson's world was suddenly upended. As he reviewed the details of the detained woman, a knock on the door startled him. The heavy door swung open to reveal a figure that none of his assumptions could have predicted, Chief Ebony Carter herself. Standing there in her crisp uniform, her steady gaze met his with an air of unyielding authority. In that charged moment, Marcus realized the truth: the woman he had detained for suspicious activity was not a common suspect, but the very leader of his department, a trailblazer whose poise and accomplishment directly challenged the biases that had clouded his judgment. The revelation struck him like a bolt of lightning, shattering his previously unshakable convictions and forcing him to confront the deep-seated prejudices that had driven his actions. As the reality of his error sank in, a mix of shame and determination surged within him. This was not merely a professional setback, it was a pivotal turning point, a call to re-examine everything he thought he knew about justice and service. In that silent, intense moment, the foundation of his beliefs began to crumble, leaving him with no choice but to seek redemption and change his approach forever. After the startling revelation that the woman he had detained was none other than Chief Ebony Carter, Officer Marcus Johnson's world was upended. Instead of the expected reprimand or dismissal, Chief Carter offered him an unexpected ultimatum that would determine the future of his career. With a measured and unwavering tone, she explained that while his years of service were commendable, his actions had been marred by deep-seated biases. Marcus's misguided judgment had not only endangered his professional integrity but also undermined the very principles of justice he swore to uphold. Rather than forcing him out, Chief Carter proposed a rigorous 6-month mentorship program under her direct supervision. This program was designed to confront his prejudices head-on. Marcus was to shadow Chief Carter at community outreach events, attend town hall meetings, and engage in intensive training sessions that emphasized empathy, diversity, and the true meaning of service. Every day, he would be required to interact with individuals from all walks of life, listening to their stories and learning firsthand about the struggles faced by marginalized communities. Reluctant but aware of the gravity of his mistake, Marcus accepted the challenge. Deep down, he recognized that this opportunity could transform him from a man blinded by assumptions into an officer who genuinely served and protected everyone without prejudice. The mentorship wasn't just about correcting past errors, it was about rebuilding trust and redefining his role in a community that demanded fairness and accountability. Thus, with a heavy heart yet a cautious resolve, Marcus embarked on a journey of personal and professional redemption, determined to learn, grow, and ultimately earn the right to serve with honor. During his 6-month mentorship, Chief Ebony Carter immersed Officer Marcus Johnson in the realities of the community he was sworn to protect. Under her guidance, Marcus attended community meetings, interacted with residents from diverse backgrounds, and listened to their personal stories of struggle and resilience. Each conversation chipped away at the preconceived notions he had built over the years. He learned that many of the suspicious activities he had once flagged were in fact manifestations of systemic inequality and marginalization. Through these eye-opening experiences, Marcus began to see that bias was not just a flaw in his judgment, it was a pervasive issue embedded in the very fabric of society. His lessons in bias became a journey of unlearning, forcing him to confront how stereotypes had colored his perceptions and led to unjust decisions. As the mentorship progressed, Marcus was compelled to look inward and critically examine his own prejudices. In quiet moments after community outreach events, he wrestled with memories of past arrests and the inherent assumptions that had driven them. Confronting his own biases was a painful process. Each realization was accompanied by the bitter taste of regret and the fear of what he had allowed to influence his actions. Marcus began to understand that his judgments had not only affected those he detained but had also contributed to the wider cycle of injustice faced by marginalized communities. Determined to make amends, he sought to redefine his role as an officer by embracing a more empathetic, inclusive approach to policing. With every conversation and every new experience, Marcus dismantled the stereotypes that had once defined him, emerging as a man committed to protecting all citizens with fairness and understanding. The weight of past mistakes bore heavily on Marcus Johnson as he stepped into the community center, a place he once saw only through the narrow lens of law enforcement. Now, he viewed it as a place of healing, a bridge between his uniform and the people he had sworn to serve. Chief Carter had urged him to take accountability, to not only recognize his biases but to actively work against them. Redemption, she had told him, wasn't about words, it was about action. Determined, Marcus began attending town halls and youth mentorship programs, speaking openly about his past biases and the dangerous consequences of racial profiling. The first time he admitted, "I was wrong," an eerie silence filled the room. People studied him with skepticism, some with outright disdain. He had been part of the system that oppressed them, and an apology wouldn't undo the harm he had caused. But he didn't stop showing up. He joined community-led policing initiatives, walking the very streets where he had once unfairly detained young black men. He listened to their experiences, their pain, and their anger directed at people like him. He worked alongside activists, learning about restorative justice, and advocated for changes within the department. He used his position to challenge fellow officers, calling out racial bias in ways he had once ignored. His hardest test came when he visited Maya's family. The girl whose life he had upended, whose tears haunted him. Standing before her mother, Marcus felt the full weight of his actions. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said, voice thick with emotion. "But I want you to know, I see the truth now. And I will spend every day making sure no one else goes through what your daughter did." The road to redemption was not smooth. Trust was not easily earned. But Marcus was no longer afraid of the discomfort of change. He embraced it, knowing that true justice demanded more than regret, it demanded transformation. The sun rose over Crestwood, casting golden hues over streets that had once felt suffocating to many of its black residents. The town still bore the scars of its past, years of systemic racism, police violence, and deep-seated mistrust. But something was different now. A shift was happening, slow yet undeniable. Marcus Johnson stood outside the newly renamed Maya Reynolds Community Justice Center, a space dedicated to legal aid, police accountability, and racial equity programs. Just a year ago, he would have scoffed at the idea of such a place existing, let alone being involved in its creation. But today, he was here as a mentor, an advocate, and a man still learning. The grand opening drew a crowd, activists, community leaders, officers willing to change, and citizens who had fought tirelessly for justice. Among them stood Maya, no longer the terrified girl he had once handcuffed, but a young woman who had found her voice. When she took the stage, her words resonated like a call to action. "We cannot erase the past, but we can build a future where justice is real for everyone. Where people like me don't have to fear the people sworn to protect us. Today, we begin that future." Applause erupted, but Marcus could see the hard truths in the crowd's eyes. Change was happening, but trust would take years, perhaps generations, to fully mend. Still, he had chosen this path, not for redemption alone, but because it was the right thing to do. Chief Carter, standing beside him, nudged his arm. "It's a start," she said. "A new era," he replied. For the first time in his life, Marcus truly understood what it meant to serve and protect, not just some, but everyone.